Thank you for watching my channel again. In this little video I'm just going to talk briefly about the Canon 100-400 Mark II lens versus the Sigma 150-600 Sport and Contemporary and the 150-600 Tamron. So basically I've bought all these lenses myself personally because there was a lot of people doing reviews who basically would say one is better than the other, and they would contradict each other, and I was left to think, well, which is the best? Because I wasn't getting the answers I wanted to know. I tried the 100-400 Mark II lens and I wasn't happy with it. Now, a lot of people will say to you that the focusing is instant. What am I talking about? Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I found focusing to be quite slow. Now, I do appreciate that Canon lens has more focusing distance to travel because it can focus up to 98 centimetres at the closest that it can focus to, that is, versus almost 3 metres on the other lenses. Basically on the Sigma Contemporary it's 2.8 metres, the Sport 2.6 and the Tamron 2.7. So yes, I did feel the focusing speed on the Canon was slow. Now people will say to you, but those are not real world examples and tests that you did because it was in the studio. Well, that was true. So I did go out to a local wildlife park and I did test this out, and I seem to think the Canon lens lost focus more often than it should have done versus the other lenses. I don't know why that was happening. I went to a camera shop to verify that it wasn't my copy, and true enough found that the focusing speed was still quite slow. So that's my personal opinion of the lens. Okay, let's go to 400mm minimum focus. And let's change that to infinity at 400mm. Let's go to minimum focus of 2.8 metres on the Contemporary. Yeah, that's locked on. Let's go to infinity. It's locked on. Let's try 400. Minimum focus. It's fine. Go to infinity. That's fine. Let's go to 400. Let's go to minimum. Try again because we moved the camera slightly. Let's try that again. Locked on. Let's go to infinity. Locked on. Right, let's talk about the Sigma 150-600 and the Tamron lens. I thought the focusing on those lenses was pretty good. I would say the Tamron versus the Sigma Contemporary, they're more or less as good as each other really. Slight edge for focusing speed to the Tamron, but slight edge for the sharpness to the Sigma Contemporary. And the difference between the Contemporary and the Sport is basically the Sport is a bit sharper between 500 and 600mm, but the Contemporary is a bit sharper from 150 to 300. So it's up to you which you think is the best. In terms of sharpness across all three of those super zoom lenses, I would give in this order in terms of sharpness: Tamron, Sigma Contemporary, and then the Sport. If you stick to 500mm on the Contemporary, it's just as good as the Sport. In terms of weight, you're talking 1.6 kilogram for the Canon 100 to 400 Mark II lens. You're talking just over 2 kilogram for the Contemporary and the Tamron. And you're talking about 3.2 kilograms for the Sport. Quite heavy. Let's talk about aperture, because it's quite important. Obviously the Canon 100 to 400 Mark II lens is a 4.5 to 5.6. So we're talking 5.6 at the long end. We're talking 5.6 at 387mm on the Contemporary Sigma lens, which is a bit more than the Canon lens, because the Canon isn't really 400, it's closer to 383mm. So in theory, if you keep the Contemporary 150 to 600 lens at 387mm, which is a bit longer than the Canon, you still retain 5.6. The disadvantage with the Sport version is at 320mm, it loses its 5.6 aperture and goes to 6.3. It's kind of disappointing considering that it is 10mm wider than the Contemporary. The good news for anyone who has a Tamron is it's 437mm, it still retains its 5.6 aperture, so it is quite long and retains that 5.6 aperture. There is rumours of a brand new lens about to be released in 2016, possibly early 2017. I suspect Canon will release it just before Christmas, and it's likely to be a 200 to 600mm f4.5 to 5.6. I believe they're doing this to try and compete with the Tamron and Sigma lenses. They have arranged for a patent which has been registered against that particular focal length in Japan, and that was effective in 2014, so they have been planning this. So just be mindful of a possible new release for that Canon new lens. I have no more information on that. So which lens is sharpest? Well, I certainly would say the 100 to 400 Mark II Canon lens is probably the sharpest lens. It's hard to say, but I would certainly say the Contemporary lens is pretty sharp as well. I did feel it was noticeably sharper than the Tamron 150 to 600, and then the Sigma lens was slightly sharper, between 500 and 600mm versus the Contemporary. If I was to say which is sharper, I would give the edge to the Canon, definitely. The optics are really razor sharp, and I suspect if you crop maybe 200mm, you might get the equivalent of the Sigma lens in terms of sharpness at 600mm. The only thing I think you might be disappointed with is focusing speed. I would certainly say that the Sigma Contemporary is twice as fast as the Canon lens is. That's my personal opinion. Some people disagree with this, but the fact that I've tested that 2 copies of the 100 to 400 Mark II lens, and I've basically compared it to the Tamron, the Sigma, Sport and Contemporary, it's quite obvious to me that the focusing speed is faster on those 150 to 600 super zoom lenses, and that's my opinion. And you can modify the distance limiter as well to make that even better than the Canon. So the Canon is a light lens at 1.6 kilogram. It's equivalent to the 300 prime f4 lens in terms of weight. You might find the 3.2 kilograms a bit too heavy for the Sigma Sport. 2 kilogram the Tamron or the Contemporary, either of those would be fine. I would give sharpness edge to the Contemporary versus the Tamron. In fact, I have done a video on that where it is quite obvious that the Sigma is sharper than the Tamron. So that's my roundup of these lenses. Check out my videos to check out the individual reviews that I've done, but my roundup says the Canon is slower at focusing but sharper. The Sigma, Contemporary and Sport are pretty good quality and they are very quick at focusing, more so than the Canon. And the Tamron, I would say roughly the same thing, except it's a bit softer. So thank you for watching and have a nice day.